From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, we're back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast, Sean. He is also the authority on Michigan craft beer and things of that nature. I don't know how I almost forgot that, but here he is. Sean, how are you doing?
Hello. Great.
You sound excited.
I'm excited. Hello.
Your enthusiasm is in your voice is matched by the enthusiasm on your face.
Thumbs up. Hello.
What have you been
great.
up to this week?
I don't know. I can't even think of a thing. Not a thing. You know, we talk about, this is a podcast, your podcast about consumption. We talk about what we watched in the previous week. I can only think of one thing that I watched besides the movie we're going to talk about. I watched a documentary about the anthrax killings that happened after 9/11 that was on Netflix, and it was okay.
Huh.
That's nothing really to write home about. My WWE show is done. I think that's done for the season. I watched Dr. Pimple Popper. That's over for the season. I don't know what else I'm going to watch.
Have you caught up on Beavis and Butthead yet? Because you should.
No, I did watch Atlanta. I watched Atlanta just started, whatever season they're on now. I think it's the final season. They had 2 episodes. You're going to get me talking about a show. I really enjoy Atlanta.
Yeah, see?
It's a good season so far. I don't want to spoil it in case nobody's seen it yet. This will be airing. This won't be airing, but this will be posted a few weeks probably after the season started. But it's a good season so far. I really enjoy it.
Well, that's good. I started to dive back into the show Cobra Kai on Netflix. And I remember you saying you haven't gotten into that. Is that correct?
Well, ironically, now that you mention that, I started watching that again today too. So I'm only in the first season. So I'm only about 4 or 5 episodes in.
So how do you feel about it 4 or 5 episodes in? Because I have opinions on it in season 5, I think they're on now. Maybe season 4.
I think they're on 5
whatever
now.
the current season. Whatever the current season is where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm on like episode 4 or 5, something like that in there. I'm kind of interested because I remember when I started watching season 1, like it totally hooked me. And I think I got through it like stupid quick because I couldn't shut it off. I was like, this is dumb and everything I like in a TV show. And now my opinion's starting to change a little bit 5 years later. So what do you think about it right now?
It is really grabbing me. I'm not to the point where Johnny is trying to start his school. He just has the one student at the point that I'm at. And Daniel, his daughter, is getting in with that guy that's like, he's an asshole and he picks on everybody. He's like the bully. So I'm just kind of I'm getting into that. You can see it's funny to see the juxtaposition where Johnny is the sensei to this nerd and probably, I'm guessing, his nerdy friends soon enough. And Daniel was like almost gung-ho you feel like the inklings of him starting his school, and he was going to have the bullies in his class, kind of. That's not exactly happened yet, but that was like the impression that I was getting from how much I've seen of the first, 4 episodes or whatever. But I would agree. I feel it's a show that right now I feel like I'm hard pressed to stop watching it. Like I want to, as soon as we're done with this, I'm probably going to watch like 2 more episodes tonight. So yeah, it's hooking me deep. And I don't know why the first episode, which I really enjoyed, didn't hook me. I think it was just when I started watching it, it was a time where there was so many other shows that were on that I wanted to watch. So I'm in a kind of a lull right now, like I said, with some of the shows that I'm not watching or shows that have ended that I liked or the season's over. So it's opened up this window for me to crawl in and watch some more of those episodes.
I'll refrain from going into the new season then too much, just because my guess would be you'll probably catch up to it by one of the next times we record.
Right.
I love that it's this little 30-minute like timepiece of a show. I think if it was an hour show, it would get old really quick. But the fact that it's so short and digestible really helps it. But I'll kind of stop at that point because I'll just let you experience the wonder that is Cobra Kai before I have any criticisms on it, I guess. Past that, though, I mean, as you're already aware of this because we've talked about it separately, but, I made the pilgrimage to the great land of Chicago. Great. Like we said, this is an episode that's going to come out several weeks from now, but we're recording this a couple days after Riot Fest happened, and I made the trip out to go see the Misfits, which was a experience for me. If you haven't, or if you weren't aware, we are both fans of that band, and we did a whole episode on one of their albums quite a ways back at this point, so you can always go back and check that out if you want to hear some of our thoughts on some of their music. But holy hell, what an experience that show was, just seeing like that band being larger than life, watching Danzig totally sucking for wind between every single song, but sounding right on key as soon as every song started back up. You know, I don't know if I would recommend the festival experience because that has its ups and its downs, but if you get a chance to see them while they're still kind of around and kicking, I recommend it to anyone. Funny thing about the show, though, what I found really interesting, I mean, it's all your typical, you know, festival stuff. It's half-ass food and half-ass beer, and, you know, Budweiser obviously bought the rights to it because every quote-unquote craft brewery was actually owned by Budweiser, but they made it look real like craft. The thing that was interesting about it to me was that some dispensary out there bought major rights, like, to be a sponsor on it. So there was at least 5 dispensaries within the concert that were selling there that we saw just kind of wandering around. But what was even more interesting than that, you know how, like, if you go to a Tigers game, they got a guy like carrying hot dogs around and slinging them in the stands and stuff like that, or beers or whatever.
Sure.
I saw at least 5 different dudes walk by, and they just had like a little cup just full of pre-rolls, and they're like, "You guys want some weed?" And they were just literally going person to person right through. I mean, this is on a big park. Like, it's essentially a fairground sized park, but they're just wandering around the crowd with pre-rolls like, "Do you guys want some weed?" Like, just selling like that. I'm like, man, they got to be making a killing on this, doing that. But that was kind of, I don't want to call it a culture shock because, I mean, we've all been to concerts. I mean, you know what's floating around there. But seeing it that, like, right there, like, would you like some weed and a hot dog? Like, well, maybe.
That's crazy. So the laws must be different there where you can openly consume in public.
I don't know if it was just for this event or if it's something where it's throughout the whole city, or I don't know. I had mentioned to you, like, when we went, we left, because I take CBD for my back, which is thankfully not in need of surgery. No offense.
I'm offended. My back is offended.
Well, sorry. But we didn't really take anything, right? We didn't take anything with us just because we didn't know what the laws were, and I didn't feel like I was going to look them up. I was like, oh, worst case scenarios, we just drink like we usually do. Big deal. So when we got there, we noticed pretty quickly, like, there were dispensaries all over, like, not even a concern. So that was fine and cool. But like I said, taking it to that next step where it was not only no one seemed to care that you were using it, just publicly walking around, but they're openly offering it to you in public in a, free and clear manner was very kind of a culture shock thing in a way. I don't know a better way to describe it. That was pretty much my week, was driving back and forth from one state to another, going to see a band and sleeping on bad hotel beds.
Where'd you guys end up staying?
So we left on Friday night, and I left from work. So basically, we found a hotel in Benton Harbor, which is about 3 hours from here, but only an hour and a half out from Chicago. So we basically stayed in Benton Harbor the first night and just kind of grabbed food on the way out there. And I didn't want to drive for whatever reason, I didn't want to pay for a hotel in Chicago for 2 nights. That should be obvious why I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it seemed more manageable just to kind of make a good chunk of the drive. We had some time to kill in the morning anyway. Like, the show didn't start till 3:00-ish. So figured crash in Benton Harbor one night, drive in, and then we had a Airbnb the second night in Chicago, which was in Boys Town of Chicago, like whatever neighborhood that is. But it led to some interesting background noise for the whole night. So it was a very, very rowdy party street that we were on, and it was kind of entertaining.
So it looks like in Chicago that you can purchase and consume at entities with an on-premises consumption license as well as on private property, subject to the discretion of the property owner. So I guess as long as you're not in a mall, you're probably okay. That's crazy.
It was kind of cool to see. And like I said, to me, I was there for it. If I hadn't taken a couple edibles before I went in, I might have bought some and partook myself, but I was already more than content.
You're already feeling good.
Yeah. But yeah, aside from that, the only other thing we did here, or that I really watched here, I mean, obviously a couple football games and stuff like that was our topic for the week. So you want to get into that?
Yeah, let's get in. Let's get into it. Let's get in. Get in.
Well, the intensity on your face just went from like 5 to like 55.
It's like I'm driving the getaway car. Get in.
We're going to talk about that getaway car because I have questions. So
okay.
So the movie for this week is something we haven't touched on yet. We haven't done a vampire movie, so we figured we'd mix it up while we're in the middle of our Halloween run of horror movies. We're talking about the movie Near Dark, which was directed by Katheryn Bigelow and came out in 1987. I'll leave the synopsis reading to you because you're just flat out better at that than I am. Why don't you tell us what this movie is kind of about?
Okay, well, I'll take this second storyline written by Keith Lowe on IMDb.com. It says, a Midwestern farm boy. Midwestern? I don't know. I'm already disagreeing with this guy's synopsis. Isn't it like Oklahoma or something?
I thought it was like Vegas or something, or not Vegas.
Nevada?
Yeah, Nevada.
The state of Las Vegas. I mean, either one.
State of Las. Yeah,
but it's Southwest.
Very deserty.
Yes,
that's what I.
Okay, I'm skipping that. Keith, you don't know what you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, frankly. So we're gonna break it down to really simple synopsis. A small town. Let me start that. A small town fair. A small town farmer's son reluctantly joins a traveling group of vampires after he is bitten by a beautiful drifter.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it. So
that's like I would say that's like the first half hour of the movie.
Yeah, and yeah, I have questions or opinions there too. I guess we should kind of start with this one. Like I mentioned, this movie is the first movie that was directed by Katheryn Bigelow. If you don't know who she is, she's become a pretty successful, to put it mildly, director. Her biggest credits would be movies like The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, if I can talk. One of those, I don't remember which one she won an Oscar for. Was it Hurt Locker? Very critically acclaimed. At the time this movie came out, I only say this because it kept coming up in anything I was looking at. I don't think it really affects the movie that much other than the cast. She was, I guess, dating James Cameron at the time, later went on to marry him. Not sure if they're still married or not, so that really doesn't matter. The reason I bring that up is you're shaking your head no.
Yeah,
they're not married.
This was like before Linda Hamilton for James Cameron, so this is like probably his first wife, I would guess.
Yeah, so I don't know how accurate this is because I understand that movies often have things like contracts, so I don't think this is really how it happened. But the story that I kept hearing kind of repeatedly is that Cameron was working on his Aliens movie, and at the time, she was just getting started, and he essentially sent the cast from a bunch of people from the cast of Aliens, just said, go work on her movie for a week or whatever and come back. And that's how you get Bill Paxton in this movie. I believe Lance Henrickson, wasn't he one of the ones that was in Aliens?
Yep, Bishop.
Yeah, quite a few people. In fact, if you really watch this movie, and you're a James Cameron fan, especially, I'd say 80s and 90s James Cameron, is that fair? Like those 2 decades. There's a lot of his regulars that you'll see kind of pop up through this movie in different roles. I don't know. I actually think the cast is kind of the biggest selling point to this movie, or at least the cast of vampires. I don't know so much how I feel about Caleb.
Well, I got to stop you there, though. Katheryn Bigelow, you've missed one huge credit, one big directing credit.
Probably.
Point Break, the original Point Break. So she directed Point Break.
I don't know how I forgot that, because that is a fantastic movie, and that's one that will get its own episode somewhere down the road here, because I absolutely love that movie. So, anyway, I don't know. What are your thoughts on some of this cast before we start kind of going too much into the actual story and what plays out here?
I like the cast quite a bit. I think that it has a good combination of actors. Now you probably know, I would say, well, I'd say there's probably 2 big actors that you would know in this movie, but it's got a nice mix. Well, Bill Paxton being one, Lance Henriksen being the other, but we also have like a bit of a mix of kind of those B-movie kind of actors as well. Mostly when I say that, I mean Tim Thomerson, who plays Adrian Pasdar, aka Caleb's dad. He's like B-movie king. He's in like tons of B-movies. So I think the casting is actually really good. I think the cast works well together. And like you said with the whole Aliens thing, I think them even if it's all just folklore that Cameron was like, hey, use these guys, they work really well together. They clearly did work together in Aliens, and they bring that chemistry, to this movie. They work really well as a group. The one character, not even necessarily casting, but the one character, before we get into any of it, that I really cannot stand in this movie is the kid, Homer, played by Joshua John Miller. I don't know if you would recognize him in anything else, but even when I've seen this movie in the past, the kid was always the one that I was, the boy, the young man was the one I could do without, I guess.
I agree with you that he's kind of a stupid character. What I will give the movie some level of credit for is the premise of what that character is supposed to be. I kind of like the idea. So Homer plays a character that is, they never really tell you how old he is supposed to be. I get the impression that he might be older than Jesse, who is like, I guess, the leader of this vampire gang.
Yeah.
But he was turned to being a vampire at, what do you think he is, like 8, 9, something like that?
No, I would say he's probably supposed to be 11 or 12.
He's young.
Yeah. Not a teenager.
He's a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not a teenager, not a toddler, somewhere in that middle ground. So old enough to be a piece of shit, but not old enough to, really have a fight with him. The thing that's interesting about the character is they kind of have him wrestle with concepts of being an adult trapped in like an adolescent body. It kind of, and having adult, I guess, desires like wanting a relationship and wanting to be, I don't know, treated like an adult, not like a kid who's 3.5 feet tall and stuff like that. The problem with it is he's kind of sucks. So he's kind of a prick.
Yeah, he's a shithead twerp. He plays the shithead twerp of the movie.
I'd say the character I can agree with you on as far as him being a twerp and all that, but I actually think the lead in this movie, Caleb, is a fairly shitty character too. Not shitty in the sense like he's a shitty person. I feel like his whole motivation is stupid. I think the resolution to his character arc is half-assed and kind of half-baked in a lot of ways, and we'll come back to that because that's going to get into how this movie kind of wraps up. And the other character that you could arguably say is the lead, at least, would be May. I feel like do we want to call it a relationship or just a pursuit? I don't even know if it's a relationship until the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's more like lust, I think. More like lustful.
I don't want to say unbelievable in the sense like it's amazing. It's unbelievable like that. It's not, I don't buy it. Like, I don't buy that he would be this obsessed with this girl within, I get the impression that the majority of this movie takes place within about 3 days. And I'm saying before the big, like, I'd say the majority of it's like, again, maybe 2-3 days. And he acts like he's been in love with this girl for like his entire freaking life.
Well, the thing that I find just really interesting about this movie, and not even necessarily that whole kind of thing, is that watching this movie, they never come out and outright say that they're vampires. I mean, it's obviously implied. Right. They step in the sunlight, their skin burns, they drink blood, stuff like that. When Caleb gets turned initially at the beginning of the movie, they expect that he's going to pull his own weight. They're going to give him a week to basically earn his keep, but he can't kill anybody. Like, he doesn't feel right about killing anybody.
He's a bitch by vampire standards.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's like a ghoul, basically. Like, when May has to feed him off of her blood because he's going to die. Like, he doesn't realize at first that he even is a vampire, and he's feeding off of her. Like, she kills, and then he feeds off of her blood so that he can sustain himself. But, yeah, I mean, it's just, they don't, like I said, they don't ever really come out and say it. So it's obvious that they are, but it's just the whole mystique around vampires, the ability to, and they don't really have a whole lot of vampire abilities, like powers, right? They can heal themselves, or they don't feel pain the way other people do. They have super strength or augmented strength. I got the impression unless there's some kind of intense brightness, be it natural or in one case fire, I got the impression they're immortal, because you see them get shot. You see them, they are advanced age, I guess is a good way to put it. So, they don't mature, and their body doesn't mature anymore. And they seem to have some level of like strength because they're throwing people around a bar with no problem in this movie. So I think they just kind of downplayed explaining the lore
to you. Like, it's not like Blade, for example, where they come out and in the first 10 minutes of the movie, they're like, okay, vampires, bullet point A, B, C, D, and this is what they like, this is what they don't like, and they don't like me.
Turnoffs, wooden stakes. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I guess I was getting at is that May has like a power, a seduction power that vampires hold the ability to entice people. So she kind of has, I mean, maybe that's a power they just don't talk about, but she clearly has some kind of control over Caleb, like not necessarily where she can make him do her bidding even when he turns into a vampire, but he has some kind of like just supernatural lust for her, just following her around like a puppy, you know?
Yeah, I just got the impression that he's some horny 20-something-year-old dude, and, you know, this is what his Friday night at the truck stop or whatever was going to be.
Yeah, he's just a thirsty dude looking for a drink.
Yeah, more or less. So, yeah, that's basically what this story is. This story starts as a movie about Caleb, who is a farm boy living with his horse veterinarian dad or something along those lines. And he goes to the local truck stop, finds a chick that he thinks is hot, and damn near date rapes her into becoming, her turning him into a vampire.
Yeah, because she doesn't want to do it.
No, she just wants to ride back to wherever by sunrise.
And she doesn't like horses for whatever reason.
Did she say that?
Well, when he goes the first night, he takes her to, he's like, let me show you, I want to show you something. He takes her to the arena or whatever, and there's a horse there. And the horse is like, it rears up on her, and she's like, yeah, I don't like horses. Horses don't like me.
Is that a vampire thing, or is it just
I don't know.
thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that vampires were averse to horses and vice versa. I didn't know that horses had an opinion on any human being. I mean...
Well, are vampires humans, or are they vampires?
Humanoids.
I'm going to just assume that the only other thing that kills vampires in this universe is horses, because it makes it more fun.
Sure. So. Stare at me the wrong way, horse, and I'll have your head.
Right. I mean, yeah, that could happen, I guess. I don't know. This movie, I don't want to call it a slow burn because it's weird. It has like peaks and valleys in a lot of ways. Like there's, the middle of the movie is probably where this movie gets the most interesting after, you see Caleb turn or start. Yeah, I guess he turns at that point. And you get a pretty entertaining scene where he gets like the worst sunburn you've ever seen in your life just from walking home at dawn. But once he actually gets introduced to this, local gang of hoodlum vampires, you at least get some interesting things that happen. You get to see them kind of riding around the town during the daytime in a van where they just spray paint out the windows except for like and put foil on the windows except for where their eyes would be, which again, I have a problem with that because of something else that happens in the movie. They're essentially crashing, and it seems like they just have a whole bunch of hideouts all over the place. I mean, this guy Jesse has like the ultimate like Amex card that he just can get a room wherever without a problem.
We know what his Amex card is, right?
Red?
It's a fat roll of cash. Every time
that's right.
He flashes out this big fucking like roll of $100 bills. He's just like, yeah, we'll take your nicest bungalow for the night or whatever.
That's a shack.
Yeah, exactly. But it seems like he has this kind of. It's never again. We're kind of we're kind of adding our own storyline onto things because it's really just not told. But it seems like he just has this route, like this particular time of the year or however many year period. He's just. I'm through this part of the country again. Like he says that he was a Civil War soldier. He fought for the South. So that tells you he's at least, 100 and some odd years old. And Lance Henrickson in 1987 was probably 45 and he looks every day of it, if not more. So, he's probably 160 years old.
He looks like he does in Pumpkinhead in this movie, just without Pumpkinhead being around him. Which also would spice things up if Pumpkinhead showed up and just started fucking up people.
I kind of feel like this movie is a lot of these action pieces held together really thinly by Caleb, his struggle, and like the push and pull of him like wanting to be him not really realizing what he's signing up for at first. Like he wants to be a vampire because he wants to be with May, but then he realizes like, I have to give up my humanity. I have to kill people. I have to give up my family. My family's really important to me. and then he just kind of, I don't know, it's that little struggle which Adrian Pasdar, who plays Caleb, really has this, like you said, he just kind of seems like a bitch. Like he's like a crybaby. Like he's crying about all this different stuff. He seems like a Gen Zer or something. He's just super soft. And he, there's just
Gen
all
Z
this
vampire cowboy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's got to be a little tough, but he just bitches about this stuff. And then to keep the story interesting, they put these little action pieces. There's the action piece. I think the primary one, I want to say, I'm thinking that there's one earlier, but I can't think of it. But the primary one is the piece in the bar where they just wreck the bar. They just beat the shit out of everybody. They massacre everybody.
That scene, so I want to pause there on that, because that scene might be, in my opinion, some of the best Bill Paxton that we've ever seen on film. Like, he is so over the top. He's almost like, I didn't hear, or I'm not claiming that this is what happened, but you hear those stories about actors who were like, oh yeah, he was all hopped up on coke and cranked the whole time that he was filming this. Like, if someone told me he was high as a kite through this whole scene, wouldn't surprise me at all, because he is just so over the top and such a abrasive prick through this entire scene, and plays it off in a way that you're like, as an audience member, it's like, oh, you're an abrasive prick, but I'm absolutely enjoying every minute of you being this asshole right now.
Oh, he's like 1000% manic. He is. Oh yeah, to the rafters. He is one of the highlights. I mean, I'd
say he is the highlight of this movie. He's by far. There's some of the other vampire characters are moderately interesting, but if you were going to say, well, what is the reason to watch this movie? Bill Paxton is why I would tell you.
Yeah, Bill Paxton as Severin just plays this unhinged character. He's balls to the wall. He is a walking hard-on. He is like a vampire erection. Like, he is just a walking vampire hard-on, and he plays it to the hilt. It's great. I mean, his performance is probably, I think him and Henrickson play really well against each other. The only minus I'd have to give Henrickson is that rat tail that he wears around, that his hair is just disgusting. But those two characters...
Well, he's also not as likable, which is a funny thing to say about Paxton in this movie, because he's a shithead, but he's a likable shithead for whatever that's worth, where you could say that about Jesse, I guess, but he's not nearly as likable as what Bill Paxton is through this movie.
Well, yeah, because Paxton is such a loose cannon. Whereas Jesse Henrickson plays this super serious, straight character. He just seems sinister. Right. Where Paxton, I know that it can't be done now, obviously, because Bill Paxton's no longer with us, but I think this movie would have had a great sequel or a prequel, I guess, where with the backstory of these characters, specifically Bill Paxton as Severin, whatever happens in this movie. I think that would probably be a better movie than what this is.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Or just seeing how this group of hooligans minus Caleb get together in the first place.
Yeah, even just their adventures, like how they meet up with, all the Calebs that come and go in this group.
Right.
Because it's obviously, he's not, May is actually the last character that got added, and she was added to the group, they say 5 years prior. She's been a vampire for 5 years. But yeah, so it's just just going back, it's all these just little set pieces, all these action pieces that tie it together. I really don't feel it's a super strong movie. I know that this movie has a big cult following, like it got really big after the release, but that bar scene is probably the climax. I mean, the climax in terms of excitement in this movie. It's not the climax of the movie, but it's like, I feel like for me, watching this movie just to get to that bar scene is like the point, and the rest of it's just.
I'd agree with that.
Easy downhill.
Well, like I said, I think it's peaks and valleys. There's the bar scene, there's the bungalow shootout, and then there's a highway or something like that? It's like the scene where Bill Paxton's character gets got is
the truck.
It's kind of
the big tanker.
Yeah. And I don't remember if they fixed Caleb at that point or not when that happens, because he's not that interesting. But those three scenes specifically are some pretty good peaks in this movie. Between them, you get a little bit of, the character development in this movie, for the most part, is just absolute garbage. most of these characters, they just kind of come and go in and out of the movie, and they just kind of are what they are, and they don't really, even Caleb, who's the focal point of this, aside from us seeing that he's kind of a whiny bitch, like, he doesn't really have a lot that, I don't get the impression that he goes on this journey where he really learns anything, right? Anything along those lines. He just kind of exists and is almost like he is the breadcrumb that kind of gets you from, pressing play to the credit scene.
Yeah,
as far as one of those...
Go ahead. No, you go. Finish.
No, go on. I don't know what I was going to say.
So I was just going to break in and say, the thing that about this movie that really kind of breaks the whole vampire, I don't know, idea is that...
Mythos?
Yeah, okay, mythos, sure. But they change Caleb back. Like, there's a process. It's basically a blood transfusion. Oh, we just drain all the blood that's in you.
So... Yeah, I was trying to hold off on that part, but yeah, his
what? I mean, come on. What else is there to say in this about this movie?
Oh, there's a couple things.
Okay, continue.
No, go on with your. We can bounce around. Go ahead. So they turn Caleb back with this bullshit transfusion.
Yeah, it's kind of like cheap. Like, oh, he's a vampire, but he doesn't like it, so we're going to turn him back. What is that? What shit is that?
Okay, so I still want to go back to the bungalow scene after this, but here, since we're on the topic of the fucking transfusion now. Okay, first, your dad is a horse farmer or whatever. How the fuck does he learn how to do anti-vampire blood transfusions? And all he looks like he does is essentially like run a needle into his arm and connect it to his son.
Yeah, so he runs a cycle of blood through, and then they're good. They're good.
Yeah, they're good. How the fuck does that work? One, what happens to Caleb's blood? Do you just have a bag of like toxic vampire goo sitting there that you took out of him?
You just pour it down the drain like you do with your oil when you're done changing it in your car.
Did it get donated to Keith Richards or something? Is that why we're still stuck with him? And then they come back to this stupid scene later where they just decide to give another blood transfusion to a person who's been a vampire for 5 years, apparently.
Yeah.
And it has the same effect. Like, I refuse to...
That means it's proven to work.
Well, I shouldn't say. It's proven to work, and it seems like at no point during the existence of whatever this strain of vampires is, what no one figured out, like, oh, you could just change your blood like a Chevy and bye-bye vampirism.
Yep.
It's fucking dumb.
That's what I like to hear.
That's fucking dumb.
The rage, embrace it.
The other thing, so what I was going to say that I don't get about the other thing that really doesn't hold up to me as far as like plot points are concerned, or I guess we're going to call them that. So, like I mentioned, they drive around in this litany of different vehicles that they find throughout the movie, which always seem to have mass amounts of black spray paint and aluminum foil in it, which is, I kind of got the impression they were stealing these cars, so I don't know if they just carry that shit around with them or what, but anyway, when they get in a car in the daytime, they immediately cover up the windows except for a slit in the window so they can see through where they're driving. At the same time, in the bungalow scene where the cops show up, you actually get a pretty entertaining 1987 style shootout between the cops and the vampires. And one of the things that's really cool from a vampire perspective is Bill Paxton blows a hole right through the door, shoots his cop. That's fine, whatever. But as soon as he does it, he lets sunlight in because he blew a hole in the door, and he immediately starts what it almost looks like he got shot. Like he has a big hole in his abdomen or whatever from where the sunlight hit him, and it puts him right on his ass. Okay. So I like that as far as adding to this whole vampire story. It kind of makes them a little more defeatable, I guess. How come when they're driving around in the daytime, that sweat doesn't just burn their eyes right out of their fucking head?
I have complaints about that scene because they're just inconsistent. They blow all these holes. All these holes are being blown in the thing, and all the sunlight's getting through. And sometimes they're just walking through it, and sometimes it burns them. And, yeah. And the other thing, the thing that I thought about
same
that
point essentially,
and the thing I was thinking in that whole scene was, you're vampires. Why don't you just stop shooting, pretend like you're dead, and when the cops come in to collect your bodies, then you can attack them and kill them all.
I didn't even think of it that far because I was too busy being like, how come this sun hurts them, but the sun in the car hurt them?
Yeah. Sometimes they can cover up and that protects them a little bit, and sometimes that doesn't do anything.
Well, and to that point, so Caleb decides to essentially what should have been sacrifice himself and go out with just a blanket over his head, and which immediately catches on fire. The cops don't seem to think it's weird that this guy's just burning from being in the sun and just walking to this van where he then proceeds to Kool-Aid Man through the bungalow, which should also expose these vampires to dramatically more sunlight. And they just all kind of go, oh, fuck, time to go, and
get in the car,
kind of pile into the van and go to the next bungalow.
And onto the fire point, because you brought it up. The special effects in this movie, I feel like, are pretty good overall. I mean, there's some kind of where the layering effects, especially at the end of the movie, especially for Homer, when he's on fire, you can tell it's fire. When he's on fire, you can tell it's clearly like composited on him. It's not like a stunt person with on fire, you know, like, oh, but there are so many shots in this where there's a stunt person that is clearly the person that's supposed to be the actor, you know, like, there's a scene where Caleb with the horse at the beginning with May, and they show the horse jumping up, but there's some guy in the background holding the rope of the horse. It's not Caleb. There's a picture, there's a part where somebody's on fire and they're walking. They don't even have a mask that looks like Caleb. They like turn and look straight at the camera, and then they close the door, and it's like, oh, that's clearly not the actor it's supposed to be. That's the stunt man. You know, it's like, guys, can we maybe do a little bit better job at this? The one question, how did they get all the smoking skin? That was pretty good. And you brought this up for, I believe, Night of the Creeps, the coloring, the blood in this movie is like rivals.
Cherry.
Oh, yeah. Rivals Night of the Creeps with how red it is. But again, I think that's kind of like an 80s aesthetic.
I think this is a little more Caro syrupy than what Night of the Creeps. Night of the Creeps look a little more paint-like to me, where this looked a little more syrupy.
A little thicker, yeah.
But it is definitely very animated, I guess, would be a good way to say it. There's scenes where it looks better, like the scene, again, in the bar, which is where probably like 75% of the blood really happens in this movie. When they knife the server or whatever and put it in the beer mug, like basically drain her blood into a beer mug, the stuff that actually ends up in the mug looks about like what you would, like the right color.
Looks like Diamond
But
Tap.
as soon as they kind of. Might be. Might explain why Bill Paxton's so, up and about in that scene. He's robo-tripping.
Yep. Sipping on some scissor.
Yeah, that could be it. But yeah, as soon as you see him, like, rubbing blood on his face or whatever, that definitely looks like it's just like Kool-Aid pack, get a little wet and just smear it and hope for the best.
And not to nitpick, but that waitress scene, they slit her neck and they fill a beer mug. Like, don't you feel like they've kind of wasted some of the blood that they had there? I mean, they had enough blood. A person has like, I don't know, multiple pints of blood in them. This is like, I don't know, 12 ounces. Hey, okay, cool. Woo.
That seems also weird because at that point, there are other people that are still not dead in the bar. And granted, they're all going to be dead soon enough anyway. We know that as the audience.
Yeah.
But don't you think, rather than just loading the gun behind the bar, you would immediately be like freaking out that these random ruffians just murdered your waitress in the middle of your bar and started like drinking blood? Like
they're pretty nonchalant.
No one seems
about the whole thing.
They're just kind of watching, and they're more pissed off that they're screwing with their drinks than the fact that people are straight out getting like filleted in the middle of the bar. No, it's questionable.
Yeah, I feel like the whole movie's kind of questionable.
How'd you like the scene with Paxton on the truck when he's all burnt up and crispy looking?
I thought it was cool that you're talking about when he hits him with the truck?
Yeah.
I thought it was cool that he like punched through the hood and he's like pulling this stuff out. I was thinking the whole time, like, isn't he afraid that he's going to punch some like moving engine piece and his fingers would get like, not Bill Paxton, but the character in the movie. I guess they would grow back or whatever, but that was probably one of the most questionable tanker truck explosions of all time. Like, I don't see the truck just jackknifed and then it exploded, which Caleb learned from that other truck driver they were going to eat.
I watch it, I'm like, oh, it's like you watch Terminator 2, but before Terminator 2 happened, because it just felt too much like the end of Terminator 2. But
yeah, and the
maybe that's
vampires
where Cameron got the idea.
Yeah, and the vampires minus the sunlight are basically like the Terminators. I mean, in this movie, they're not very stoppable.
Well, a lot of the music has a lot, like, then the scoring, this feels very like 1980s Terminator James Cameron like. It's got that kind of ominous, kind like one
droning
note that just yeah.
Well, Tangerine Dream did the soundtrack for this, so it's very Tangerine Dream, very droney. It wasn't quite as good when I saw like soundtrack or whatever theme or whatever it was by Tangerine Dream. I was like, oh, the music, I hadn't seen this in a while. I'm like, the music is going to be pretty good because I generally think that Tangerine Dream does some pretty good work. And it was just like, no, this is a kind of, like you said, one note, I think would perfectly describe a lot of the music in this.
Would you believe me if I told you this was a $5 million movie?
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1987, $5 million, probably.
Would you believe me if I told you it did not make that $5 million back?
I would. I would.
I mean, we're kind of like spinning wheels at this point. Like there are redeeming qualities to this movie. I'll give it that. I mean, it is relatively like competently made in the fact that, in the essence that it looks good. There's nothing like so abysmal in it that's just going to annoy you, like to the point where you can't watch it. There's certainly questionable plot hole things throughout it, but in the big scale, like, I guess maybe this is just me because I'm not a huge vampire fan to begin with. I will say I still find this to be one of the more watchable vampire movies. Certainly not one of the best, but I think there's, and again, a lot of this is just really Bill Paxton just going nuts. But I think there's enough to warrant giving it a try if you haven't. Are you ready to put a hot dog rating on this?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and do hot dogs.
Okay. For me, I'd probably put this right around 6 crispy, sunburned Bill Paxtons out of, I don't know, 11 pumpkin heads. Like I said, it's got its moments that are good. It's got its things that are entertaining in it, but it's certainly not something I want to watch on a regular basis. I can say that if you just want to marathon a bunch of vampire movies, this is probably one that should be in that line somewhere, depending on how many, like, I don't know how many you would have to watch to say this has to be in there. But if you were to say like 10, I'd probably have it somewhere mixed in that 10 movie like marathon. Not the best movie. You can definitely see there's some good like ideas in it. There's things that, again, you just would like to see how this puzzle is pieced together in a little more comprehensive way to make the story kind of fit to a more satisfying end. And for someone who has said more than once on the show, I don't really need a plot, I just need some carnage and body count and all that, this movie really does kind of drop the ball with making you give a shit or like or care about any of these characters because they are so short-lived. You don't really, aside from Caleb, you don't really feel like any connection to any of these characters to make you want to go much farther than that.
For me, I'd probably give this, I'd agree with you. I'd say probably six hot dogs out of 11 smoking preteens. I think for this movie, up until this point, up until 1987, there aren't a whole lot of movies where vampires are shown in a more contemporary light, where, you know, most vampire movies would be like the Dracula, or they'd be the Hammer stuff, or, you know, whoever playing Dracula. I mean,
Lost Boys came out the same summer as this.
That's true, but I said not very many. I didn't say none.
Right.
But it wasn't
okay.
It wasn't like a thing that you saw a whole lot of. So, and I think it came out like Lost Boys came out right around the same time that this did. So that probably cannibalized.
I think it was like a week or two before it or something like that. So
you're getting like a dearth of all these quote unquote air quotes vampire movies. But I think it, like you said, it would be a good movie, I think, if you were watching like a marathon of vampire movies. It's kind of, it almost straddles the line of being more action than it does horror. There aren't a whole lot of horror elements to this. There's more of like suspense, thriller type kind of vibes in this. I feel like it's almost more action horror in a way. The action scenes are, you know, like we mentioned, the bar scene, the bungalow scene. I think a major reason I would put this movie right in the middle. I feel like it's a nice kind of midpoint to maybe get to a little bit more exciting vampire movies at the end of your marathon, and at the beginning maybe do more of the classic kind of stuff. This is a nice bridge between the two. I'd put Lost Boys probably after this because it's a little bit more exciting than this movie. But I've been trying to say this for the entire summary that I'm trying to give here, but Bill Paxton is the reason to watch this movie. I'm a big Lance Henriksen fan too, so I think he does really good work in this, but those two are definitely the stars to watch in this. They really make the movie, whereas the kind of main character, like I mentioned earlier, is kind of a little whiny, a little too soft for my taste. But yeah, I would say 6 out of 11 for me is pretty fair on this one.
Yeah, and there's, I don't know, this movie, as far as like in the big scheme of vampire movies, so we haven't talked about either of these movies on the show yet, but if you were to just real briefly say, like, give me 2 vampire movies to watch, the 2 I would almost immediately go to would be From Dusk Till Dawn and Lost Boys. And this has a little bit of both of those in there, just not nearly as well done as either. It's got that kind of Western kind of shootout feel that Dusk Till Dawn has. And it's got that kind of 80s, like, dirtbag trash kids feel that Lost Boys has. It just doesn't flesh out that idea as well as either one of those. Credit to Fright Night 2, which we also haven't talked about yet, but there's another one that would be that 80s vampire vibe. But if you were stringing them all together, I could see this kind of fitting right in the middle of that and having a home there. I just don't know that it would want to be the whole thing that I'd want to pitch put my whole pitch on a vampire marathon based off this movie alone. Aces.
Yes.
So, you got anything else we want to tag on with this before we start wrapping on this one?
No, I think that it is a good... It's like a mix of those 2 movies.
Yeah. Which is weird because From Dusk Till Dawn is, maybe 10 years after this? Something like that? So,
at least.
Quite a bit?
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. So maybe they saw those 2 movies and just said, we could do this better.
Maybe the bar scene.
Well, yeah.
96.
I'm going to take back my rating. Just go watch From Dusk Till Dawn. That's a much more entertaining movie. Maybe not. Anyway, so I think that's all we got on this one. Unfortunately, some of these don't give us as many talking points as others. In the meantime, though, while you're listening to this, if you could, we'd appreciate it if you gave us a follow on all those social networks. We're at Dewey Podmonster all over the place. Check out our website we have up now, which is just crap.town. You can listen to everything on there as well and subscribe to us, review, messages, all that good stuff. We would greatly appreciate it. Sean, Michigan Beer Authority, man, tell me what you got going on right now.
Sure, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com. I've been come off my hiatus, not talking about beer as in reviews, but talking about Michigan beer news. I'm a poet, and I didn't even know it. You can check me out there. You can watch my new videos. You can check me out on the social media at Draft Therapy.
All right. Well, until next time, go get a tan. Make sure you're not a vampire, and we'll talk to you soon. Have yourself a good week. Cheers.
Let me get my level. I move my mic around. See if my level is up to the level.
Yeah, puns.
Yeah.
Puns.
See if my volume is up to the level. It's funnier the second time. Yeah, I'm ready.
I can't get past these George Carlin level jokes that you're telling here. So.
I'll be here all week.
Yeah, me too.